name is Eliza Mercer, and I am 29 years old. As a physical therapist in Portland, I believe in the body's ability to heal. But that rainy October evening, as I sat in the emergency room with my fractured wrist, I never imagined my own family would claim I had done this to myself. When the X-rays finally revealed the distinct spiral pattern of my broken bones, the doctor's eyes met mine with understanding. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. I had always been the methodical one in my family. While my relatives thrived in creative chaos, I found comfort in structure and routine. My mother, Diane, 54, was a prominent local artist whose abstract paintings hung in galleries throughout the Pacific Northwest. Her wild curls and paint-splattered clothes matched her free-spirited approach to life. My father, Richard, 56, owned a successful music store downtown where local bands performed on weekends. He was charismatic and impulsive, living for the moment rather than planning for tomorrow. My older brother, Marcus, 32, followed in their artistic footsteps. A talented musician who toured with indie bands, he lived the nomadic lifestyle our parents had always romanticized. Then there was me, Eliza, the family outlier. I chose science over art, stability over spontaneity, planning over improvisation. My decision to become a physical therapist had been met with barely concealed disappointment from my family. Such a conventional choice. My mother had sighed when I announced my career path. But I suppose someone needs to be practical. The backhanded compliment stung, as did her implication that practicality was somehow less valuable than creativity. Growing up in our colorful Victorian home in Portland's Alberta Arts District, I often felt like the only adult in the room. While my parents hosted midnight jam sessions and my brother practiced drums at all hours, I would retreat to my room with textbooks and study guides. When bill collectors called, I was the one who answered the phone and helped my parents sort through their finances. When the refrigerator stood empty because everyone forgot to grocery shop, I was the one who made lists and ensured we had food. Eliza's our little responsible one. My mother would tell her artist friends, ruffling my hair as if I were still a child even when I was in high school. She keeps us all grounded. It wasn't a compliment, it was an assignment of a role I never asked for. Despite our differences, I loved my family fiercely. I admired their creativity, their passion, their ability to see beauty in unexpected places. I just wished they could understand that my different approach to life wasn't a rejection of theirs, but simply my own path. After college and physical therapy school, I moved into my own apartment across town, establishing some healthy distance while remaining close enough for family dinners and celebrations. I built a stable life for myself, working at a respected rehabilitation center and slowly paying off my student loans. My apartment was organized and peaceful, a sanctuary from the beautiful chaos of my family home. Everything changed 2 years ago, on what began as an ordinary Friday evening. I had just finished an exhausting week at the rehabilitation center, helping patients recover from various injuries and surgeries. The satisfaction of seeing Mrs. Donnelly walk unassisted for the first time since her hip replacement had carried me through a day of challenging patience and meticulous documentation. I was looking forward to a quiet weekend at home, perhaps catching up on journal articles and taking a long hike in Forest Park if the Portland rain held off. As I drove home, my phone rang through my car's Bluetooth system. It was my mother, her voice uncharacteristically urgent. "Eliza, thank goodness I caught you. We need your help. It's your father." The fear in her voice immediately set my heart racing. "What happened? Is he okay?" I asked, already changing lanes to head toward their house instead of my apartment. "He fell off the ladder while hanging lights in the backyard for tomorrow's gathering. He's in a lot of pain, but you know how he is. He refuses to go to the hospital. Can you come look at it? You're the medical expert in the family." I took a deep breath, reminding myself that my mother tended toward dramatics. "Mom, I'm a physical therapist, not a doctor. If he's badly hurt, he needs the ER, not me. Please, Eliza, just come assess the situation. You know how much he hates hospitals. If you think it's serious, I'm sure you can convince him to go." I couldn't refuse. "I'll be there in 20 minutes. When I arrived at my childhood home, I found my father sprawled on the living room sofa, his right ankle propped on a pillow and already swollen to twice its normal size. Empty beer bottles on the coffee table suggested he'd been self-medicating. "Dad, what happened?" I asked, kneeling beside him to examine his ankle. He winced as I gently touched the swollen area. "Just a little tumble from the ladder. Your mother's overreacting as usual. Nothing a few beers and a good night's sleep won't fix." I carefully assessed his injury, noting the extensive swelling, bruising, and his inability to bear weight. "This needs x-rays, Dad. I can't tell if it's broken without imaging, but given the swelling and pain, we need to rule out a fracture." My mother hovered nearby, wringing her hands. "See, Richard? I told you it might be serious." My father waved dismissively. "It's just a sprain. I've had worse." "Even if it is just a sprain," I countered, using air quotes, "severe sprains need proper treatment. Otherwise, you could have chronic instability and pain." After 30 minutes of negotiation, I finally convinced my father to let me drive him to the urgent care center nearby. The x-rays confirmed what I suspected: a displaced lateral malleolus fracture that would require surgery to properly heal. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. This incident marked the beginning of what I now recognize as a pattern. As the responsible one, with medical knowledge, I became the family's default healthcare provider. Calls for help came more frequently. My mother's persistent back pain, my brother's shoulder injury after a stage dive gone wrong, my father's various ailments. I tried to maintain boundaries, consistently advising them to see appropriate specialists, but they preferred to rely on me. "Why pay some stranger when we have you?" my father would say, as if my time and expertise were family property rather than my profession. Still, I couldn't deny that these medical emergencies had brought us closer. For the first time in my life, my family seemed to value my choices. My medical knowledge, once dismissed as boringly practical, now made me essential. During my father's recovery from ankle surgery, our conversations extended beyond his rehabilitation exercises to genuine interest in my work and life. "I never realized how much knowledge and skill goes into what you do," he admitted one afternoon as I helped him with his prescribed exercises. "It's not just physical. You're part psychologist too, knowing how to motivate people." These moments of connection and recognition filled a void I hadn't fully acknowledged. After years of feeling like an outsider in my own family, I was finally being seen and appreciated for who I was, not who they wished I would be. 6 months after my father's accident, I received a call from my brother Marcus. He was back in town after touring with his band and wanted to meet for coffee. We hadn't seen each other in nearly a year, and I was eager to reconnect. We met at a small cafe near my apartment. Marcus looked tired, his normally vibrant demeanor subdued. After catching up on basic life updates, he hesitated, then leaned forward. "Liz, I need to ask a favor," he said, using the childhood nickname only he still used. "I'm in a bit of a financial bind. The band's last tour didn't break even, and I've got some debts piling up." My heart sank. While I loved my brother dearly, his financial irresponsibility was legendary. Still, I listened as he explained his situation. "I'm not asking for a handout," he insisted, though his next words contradicted this claim. "Just a loan until the next tour. $10,000 would clear the most urgent debts and get me back on my feet." $10,000. It was a significant amount, more than I could comfortably spare. But the pleading look in my brother's eyes and the memories of our newfound family closeness made it difficult to refuse. "I'll need some time to think about it," I said carefully. "That's a lot of money, Marcus." He reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "I know, Liz. I wouldn't ask if it wasn't important. And I swear I'll pay you back this time. This time." The words hung between us, acknowledging the smaller loans over the years that had never been repaid. After careful consideration and adjusting my budget, I ultimately transferred $8,000 to Marcus, most of my emergency fund but not quite the full amount he'd requested. His gratitude seemed genuine, and for a few months he made token payments toward repayment. Then the payment stopped, and his calls became less frequent. When I gently inquired about the remaining balance, his responses grew defensive. "I'm your brother, Eliza. Is money really that important to you? It's not like you have a family to support or anything." The comments stung, suggesting that my financial needs were somehow less valid because I was single and childless. But I let it go, valuing our relationship over the money. This established a new dynamic in our family. My brother's loan was just the beginning. My mother needed help with medical bills not covered by her insurance. My father's music store faced a temporary cash flow problem. Each request came with promises of repayment that never materialized and subtle guilt trips when I hesitated. "Family helps family" became their mantra whenever I expressed concern about my dwindling savings. The irony wasn't lost on me. I had spent my childhood being the responsible one, only to now be made to feel selfish for wanting to maintain financial stability. The most troubling aspect wasn't the money itself, but how these financial exchanges affected our relationships. When I couldn't afford to fund my brother's recording studio renovation, he stopped inviting me to his shows. When I suggested my parents meet with a financial advisor rather than continuously borrowing from me, my mother acted wounded. "After everything we've done for you," she said, as if my childhood role as the family's responsible member had been a favor to me rather than a burden. Despite these tensions, I continued trying to maintain a relationship with my family. I still attended Sunday dinners when invited, still celebrated birthdays and holidays, still answered medical questions and offered advice when asked. I simply became more cautious about financial involvement, gradually establishing boundaries that, while necessary for my well-being, created palpable distance. Last October, things took an unexpected turn. I had been experiencing persistent pain in my right wrist for several weeks. Not surprising given my profession's physical demands. As a physical therapist, I knew the importance of addressing such issues early, so I scheduled an appointment with an orthopedic specialist. The day before my appointment, I received an urgent call from my mother. My father had thrown his back out while moving equipment at the music store and was in excruciating pain. Could I come over and help? Despite my own discomfort, I couldn't refuse. I found my father on the living room floor, unable to stand upright. Using my professional knowledge, I performed a basic assessment to rule out red flags that would require emergency attention. "It seems like a muscular strain, not disc involvement," I explained, helping him into a more comfortable position. "But you should still see a doctor to be sure." My mother hovered anxiously. "Can't you just treat him, Eliza? You know what you're doing, and you have all those fancy techniques." I sighed, trying to maintain my patience. "Mom, I can show him some positions to ease the pain and recommend some gentle movements. But he needs proper medical attention, possibly imaging, and a treatment plan from his own doctor." "But that's so expensive," she protested. "And you're right here. I'm his daughter who happens to be a PT, not his healthcare provider," I explained for what felt like the 100th time. "There are ethical boundaries I need to maintain." Despite my protests, I spent the next 3 hours helping my father manage his pain, showing my mother how to assist him with basic movements, and eventually helping him to bed. By the time I left, my own wrist was throbbing intensely from the physical effort of supporting my father's weight. The next morning, my wrist pain had escalated dramatically. Every movement sent shooting pain up my arm, and I noticed concerning swelling. At my appointment, the orthopedic specialist ordered X-rays. "You have a scaphoid fracture," he explained, showing me the images. "See this small bone in your wrist? There's a hairline fracture here." He pointed to a barely perceptible line on the X-ray. "Given the location and your profession, I recommend surgery to ensure proper healing and full function." I was stunned. The scaphoid bone has notoriously poor blood supply, making healing difficult. Without proper treatment, I could face long-term issues that would affect my ability to work as a physical therapist. Surgery would mean weeks of recovery and reduced income. When I called my mother to explain why I wouldn't be able to help with my father's care for a while, her response was unexpected. "A fractured wrist? Eliza, are you sure? That seems convenient timing." Her implication hung in the air between us. "What exactly are you suggesting, Mom?" Nothing, she backpedaled. "It's just..." You've been talking about needing a break, and now suddenly you have this injury that's hard to see on an X-ray." I was speechless. My own mother was insinuating that I might be faking or exaggerating an injury to avoid helping my father. "I have the X-rays, Mom. My doctor has scheduled surgery for next week. This is serious." "Of course, honey. I'm sure it is. We'll manage somehow." Her tone remained skeptical, cutting deeper than the pain in my wrist. After hanging up, I sat in my car in the medical center parking lot, tears streaming down my face. The physical pain paled in comparison to the emotional wound my mother's doubt had inflicted. How had we reached this point? When had I become someone my family distrusted rather than relied upon? The day of my surgery arrived, and no one from my family offered to drive me to the hospital or help during the initial recovery period. My friend Natalie stepped in, driving me to and from the procedure and staying with me the first night to ensure I was safe with the pain medication. "I can't believe your family isn't here," she commented as she helped me adjust my pillows. "Especially since they always seem to expect you to drop everything when they need medical help." I didn't have the energy to defend them. The truth was, I couldn't understand it either. 3 days after my surgery, still heavily bandaged and managing pain, I received a group text from my brother. "Family meeting at Mom and Dad's tonight at 7. Important to have everyone there." Despite Natalie's objections that I was in no condition to drive, I knew my absence would only fuel whatever suspicions my family harbored. I carefully navigated my car with one hand, arriving at my parents' house to find them, and Marcus already seated around the dining table, an unusual formality for our typically casual family. "Eliza," my father acknowledged me with a nod. "Glad you could make it. How's the injury?" The slight pause before injury spoke volumes. I held up my bandaged wrist. "Still painful. The surgeon said everything went well, though. What's this meeting about?" My mother exchanged glances with my father and brother before speaking. "We're concerned, Eliza, about you." "About me? I'm the one who just had surgery." "That's part of what we want to discuss," she continued. "We think you might be dealing with some issues that you're not addressing." I looked between them, confused. "What issues?" My brother leaned forward. "Liz, we've noticed a pattern. Ever since we started asking for financial help, you've been pulling away. And now this convenient injury right when Dad needs your help. Are you seriously suggesting I fractured my own wrist to avoid helping Dad?" The absurdity of the accusation momentarily overwhelmed the hurt. "Not intentionally," my father interjected, "but maybe psychosomatically. Stress can manifest physically, and you've seemed stressed about money lately." I stared at them in disbelief. "I have an actual fracture. It's visible on X-rays. My surgeon has photographs from the procedure." "Stress fractures can happen from repetitive motions," my mother said, as if she were the medical expert now. "And you've been so resistant to helping us lately. It seems like more than coincidence." "Resistant to helping you?" I repeated, my voice rising despite my effort to remain calm. "I've given you thousands of dollars. I've provided free medical advice and care. I've dropped everything countless times when you called with emergencies. And now, the one time I need support, you're accusing me of what? Faking an injury? Creating a fracture through the power of my mind?" "We're just concerned," my brother said, his tone condescending. "Maybe you need to talk to someone about these financial anxieties you're developing." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. They had systematically drained my savings, made me feel guilty for establishing any financial boundaries, and now were suggesting I needed psychological help for being concerned about money? "I brought my X-rays," I said quietly, pulling the envelope from my bag. I had anticipated skepticism, though not to this degree, and had asked my surgeon for copies. "Would you like to see them?" My mother waved dismissively. "We're not doctors, Eliza. We wouldn't know what we're looking at." "Then perhaps you shouldn't be making medical assessments about the cause of my fracture," I replied, my patience wearing thin. "Look," my father said, his tone shifting to the one he used when trying to close a difficult sale at the music store. "We're not saying you don't have an injury. We're just wondering if there might be emotional factors contributing to it." "And what would those emotional factors be exactly?" I challenged. My brother answered bluntly, quote, "Your resentment about helping the family financially. It's obvious you've been pulling away, becoming more selfish with your resources. Selfish? The word hit like a physical blow. I've given you all nearly $20,000 over the past 2 years, money I'll likely never see again, despite all the promises of repayment. There it is, my mother said triumphantly, as if I'd just proven their point. It always comes back to money with you lately. The Eliza we've known all her life would never keep score like this. The Eliza you've known all her life, I said slowly, has always been taken for granted. The responsible one who fixed problems, paid bills, and never complained. Well, maybe that Eliza is tired of being used. My father's expression hardened. No one is using you. This is what families do. They support each other. Support goes both ways, I countered. When have any of you supported me lately? Where were you after my surgery? Who offered to drive me home from the hospital or help me during recovery? Uncomfortable silence filled the room. Finally, my mother spoke, her voice softer, but still unyielding. We're trying to help you now, Eliza. We're concerned about this pattern we're seeing. First, the reluctance to help financially, now this injury that keeps you from helping your father. It seems like you're finding ways to withdraw from the family. In that moment, I realized they truly believed what they were saying. In their minds, my injury was at best an exaggeration, at worst a psychosomatic manifestation of my desire to escape family obligations. The people who should have believed in me most, who should have supported me through a challenging recovery, instead saw my pain as a convenient excuse. I need to leave, I said, standing carefully to avoid jarring my wrist. This conversation isn't productive. See? Running away again, my brother muttered. I paused at the door, turning back to face my family one last time that evening. I'm not running away. I'm removing myself from a harmful situation. There's a difference. As I drove home, tears blurring my vision, I couldn't shake the feeling that something fundamental had broken. And it wasn't just my wrist. The family I had always tried so hard to please, to support, to make proud, had revealed how little they truly knew or valued me. Over the next few weeks, I focused on my physical recovery and tried to process the emotional fallout from that family meeting. My parents made occasional check-in calls that felt more like monitoring than genuine concern. My brother sent texts asking when I'd be back to normal, by which he clearly meant available to help them again. Not once did any of them offer practical assistance during my recovery. Instead, they seemed to be waiting for me to admit that I'd overreacted, that my injury wasn't as serious as I'd claimed, that I was ready to resume my role as the family support system. The turning point came 4 weeks after my surgery, at my follow-up appointment. My surgeon, Dr. Patel, reviewed the new X-rays with evident concern. The fracture isn't healing as well as I'd hoped, she explained, pointing to the images. See how the bone alignment has shifted slightly? This is unusual given the surgical intervention. What does that mean? I asked, a knot forming in my stomach. It means we need to look more closely at what's happening. I'd like to order a CT scan to get a better picture. She paused, studying me carefully. Eliza, as a medical professional, you understand the importance of full disclosure with your healthcare providers. Is there any chance you've been using your wrist more than the prescribed limitations? I shook my head. I've been extremely careful. I know how serious scaphoid fractures can be, especially for someone in my profession. What about the initial injury? The X-ray patterns suggest a specific type of force, a twisting motion while bearing weight. That's not typically how repetitive stress fractures present. I thought back to that evening at my parents' house, helping my father. I was helping move someone who was in pain. They lost their balance, and I caught their weight awkwardly with my right hand. Dr. Patel nodded. That's consistent with what I'm seeing, but I'm concerned about something else. She hesitated, choosing her words carefully. The new X-rays show subtle signs of additional stress on the healing bone. Have you had to use your wrist to support weight again recently? The question confused me. No, I've been following all post-surgical protocols rigorously. I believe you, she said, but these images suggest otherwise. Let me show you. She pointed to slight variations in the bone density around the fracture site. These patterns typically indicate periods of rest interrupted by episodes of significant stress. As I stared at the images, a disturbing possibility surfaced. The 3 times my mother had asked me to come help with my father's ongoing back issues, despite my protests about my own recovery. Each time, I'd maintained firm boundaries about what I could safely do, but there had been moments, my father stumbling, my instinctively reaching out to steady him, when I'd felt sharp pain in my wrist. There might have been a few brief incidents, I admitted. Nothing prolonged, but possibly enough to cause pain in the moment. Dr. Patel nodded gravely. Even brief episodes of stress can significantly impact healing, especially with this type of fracture. She ordered the CT scan and adjusted my treatment plan, emphasizing the absolute necessity of protecting my wrist from any stress during the healing process. As I left her office, a new resolution formed. The X-ray patterns had revealed not just the state of my physical healing but the nature of my family relationships. They had doubted the legitimacy of my injury while simultaneously creating situations that jeopardized my recovery. It was time to establish firmer boundaries, not just for my financial well-being but for my physical health and emotional sanity. That evening, I received yet another call from my mother. "Eliza, your father's back is acting up again. Could you come over tomorrow? Just to show me some of those exercises again? It won't take long." For the first time, I didn't hesitate or make excuses. "No, Mom, I can't." "What do you mean you can't?" Her surprise was evident. "It's just for an hour or so. My follow-up appointment was today." I explained. "The fracture isn't healing properly because it's been subjected to stress. Stress that likely occurred during the times I came to help with Dad, despite my protests that I was still recovering." "Are you blaming us for your wrists not healing?" Her tone turned defensive. "I'm stating a medical fact supported by X-ray evidence. The specific pattern of bone healing shows interruptions that coincide with the times I've helped Dad. My surgeon pointed it out today." There was a long pause before my mother responded. "Well, I'm sorry if helping your father has been such an inconvenience. This isn't about inconvenience, Mom. It's about my health and my ability to continue in my profession. If this doesn't heal properly, I could lose function in my dominant hand. Do you understand what that would mean for my career as a physical therapist?" Another pause. "I suppose you'll use this as another excuse to distance yourself from the family." Her response crystallized everything that had been wrong in our relationship. My well-being was secondary to my utility to them. My boundaries were seen as rejection rather than necessary self-care. "It's not an excuse, Mom. It's a reason. A medical necessity documented by X-rays and confirmed by a surgeon." I took a deep breath. I need to focus on healing. Not just my wrist, but from the pattern of being taken for granted and disbelieved by my own family. "What are you saying, Eliza?" "I'm saying I need space. I won't be coming over to help with Dad or anyone else until my wrist is fully healed. And even then, things need to change in how we relate to each other. I deserve to be believed when I tell you I'm injured. I deserve support rather than suspicion. I deserve the same consideration I've always given all of you." My mother's silence on the other end of the line spoke volumes. I could almost see her processing my words, trying to find a way to regain control of the situation. When she finally spoke, her voice had that artificial brightness she used when trying to smooth over uncomfortable moments. "You're overreacting, Eliza. No one said we don't believe you're injured. We're just concerned about you, that's all. Why don't you come to Sunday dinner this weekend? We can talk about all this in person." I closed my eyes, steadying myself against the familiar pull of guilt and obligation. "No, Mom. I need time and space to heal, physically and emotionally. I'll let you know when I'm ready to talk again. But I have to go. Goodbye, Mom." I ended the call before she could respond, my hand trembling slightly as I set down my phone. The silence of my apartment enveloped me, not the uncomfortable silence of conflict, but the peaceful quiet of a decision finally made. For perhaps the first time in my life, I had chosen my own well-being over my family's demands. The weeks that followed were both challenging and liberating. My family's response to my boundary setting played out exactly as I might have predicted. My mother called daily at first, her messages veering between concerned inquiries about my health and thinly veiled guilt trips. "I just don't understand why you can't talk to us while you're recovering," one voicemail said. "It's not like we're asking you to lift anything. We're your family, Eliza. Families are supposed to communicate." My father took a different approach, his messages gruff and dismissive. "Your mother's upset. Call her when you're done with this. Whatever this is." My brother Marcus was the most direct. "This silent treatment is childish, Liz. So we questioned your injury. Get over it. You've always been too sensitive." Each message confirmed that I had made the right decision. Not once did any of them acknowledge that they had been wrong to doubt me. Not once did they express genuine concern for my health without immediately pivoting to how my injury affected them. I focused instead on my healing, not just of my wrist, but of my sense of self. I started seeing a therapist, Dr. Vivian Chen, who specialized in family dynamics and boundary setting. In our weekly sessions, patterns I had never fully recognized began to emerge with painful clarity. "What you're describing sounds like a classic family system with rigid roles," Dr. Chen explained during one session. "You were assigned the role of the responsible one early in life, and any deviation from that role creates discord because it threatens the system's balance." "But I was just a child," I said, the injustice of it hitting me anew. Why was I responsible for being the adult when there were actual adults in the house? "That's exactly the point," she nodded. "In healthy family systems, children aren't burdened with adult responsibilities. The fact that you were expected to be the practical, responsible one while your parents and brother pursued their creative interests, without regard for consequences, represents a fundamental role reversal." These insights were both illuminating and painful. I had spent my entire life trying to earn my family's approval by being reliable, practical, and selfless. Yet these very qualities were taken for granted, expected rather than appreciated, demanded rather than requested. Setting boundaries isn't selfish, Dr. Chen reminded me repeatedly. It's necessary for healthy relationships. Think of it as drawing a circle around yourself, defining where you end and others begin. As I continued my physical therapy exercises to rehabilitate my wrist, I also practiced exercises for strengthening my emotional boundaries. I learned to sit with the discomfort of saying no without immediately rushing to explain or apologize. I practiced recognizing the difference between genuine needs and manipulative demands. Most importantly, I began to understand that love shouldn't require the sacrifice of my own well-being. 6 weeks into my self-imposed distance from my family, I received an unexpected visitor. I was returning from a physical therapy appointment when I spotted my Aunt Julia sitting on the steps outside my apartment building. Unlike my parents and brother, Aunt Julia, my father's younger sister, had always seemed to see me clearly. She had been the one family member who celebrated my decision to pursue physical therapy, who asked thoughtful questions about my work, who treated me as a person rather than a role. "Aunt Julia, what are you doing here?" I asked, genuinely surprised but not displeased to see her. She stood, brushing off her jeans. "Your mother mentioned you weren't returning calls. I thought I'd check on you in person." Her eyes went to my wrist, still in a brace. "How's the healing coming along?" The simple question, asked with genuine concern rather than skepticism, brought unexpected tears to my eyes. "It's complicated. Would you like to come up for tea?" In my apartment, as I awkwardly prepared tea with my non-dominant hand, Aunt Julia observed me without offering to help, a small courtesy that acknowledged my independence even while injured. "So," she said once we were settled with steaming mugs, "want to tell me what's really going on between you and the rest of the family?" I hesitated, unsure how much she already knew, and reluctant to seem like I was bad-mouthing my parents and brother. Aunt Julia had always maintained good relationships with everyone in the family, threading the needle between various conflicts with diplomatic skill. "It's complicated," I repeated, taking a cautious sip of tea. "Family usually is," she replied with a wry smile. "But I'm guessing it has something to do with them not believing your injury is legitimate?" I looked up sharply. "How did you know?" "Your mother called me after your last conversation." She said you were being dramatic about a minor wrist injury and using it as an excuse to avoid family obligations. Aunt Julia shook her head. I've known my brother and his tendency towards self-absorption my entire life, but I was still shocked by their response to your injury. The validation, hearing that someone else in the family recognized the inappropriateness of their behavior, loosened something tight in my chest. Words began to flow. The family meeting where they'd accused me of psychologically manufacturing my fracture, the follow-up appointment revealing that helping my father had likely compromised my healing, the years of financial and emotional drain that had preceded this breaking point. Aunt Julia listened without interruption, her expression growing increasingly troubled. When I finally fell silent, she set down her mug with deliberate care. I had no idea it had gotten this bad, she said quietly. I knew they relied on you. They've always put too much responsibility on your shoulders, even when you were just a child. But questioning the legitimacy of a medically documented injury? That crosses a line. Thank you, I whispered. Those two simple words carrying the weight of decades of longing to be believed, to be seen. Have you shown them the X-rays? She asked. Not that you should have to prove your injury, but sometimes visual evidence can be persuasive where words fail. I nodded. I tried. They dismissed them, said they wouldn't know what they were looking at anyway. The truth is, they don't want to see the evidence because it would force them to acknowledge how wrong they've been, not just about my injury, but about how they've treated me for years. Aunt Julia reached across the table and gently squeezed my uninjured hand. I'm sorry, Eliza, you deserved better from them. Those words, simple, direct, and absolutely true, broke something open inside me. Tears came, not the frustrated tears of recent weeks, but deep, cleansing sobs that seemed to rise from a well of hurt I'd been carrying my entire life. Aunt Julia moved to sit beside me, her arm around my shoulders as I finally mourned the family relationship I had always wanted but never truly had. When the tears finally subsided, I felt lighter somehow, as if I had set down a burden I hadn't even realized I was carrying. What happens now? Aunt Julia asked gently. I took a deep breath. I don't know. I need to heal. Physically for certain, but emotionally too. I can't go back to the way things were, being taken for granted and disbelieved. No, you can't, she agreed firmly. And you shouldn't. Boundaries are healthy, Eliza. They're not walls to keep people out. They're guidelines for how you deserve to be treated. They'll never understand that, I said, voicing my deepest fear. They'll see any boundary as rejection. That's their limitation, not yours, Aunt Julia replied. You can't control how they receive your boundaries, only that you establish and maintain them for your own well-being. Before she left, Aunt Julia promised to check in regularly and offered practical help if I needed it, a stark contrast to my immediate family's approach. She didn't try to convince me to reconcile prematurely or suggest I was overreacting. Instead, she simply validated my experience and supported my right to protect myself. 2 days after Aunt Julia's visit, I received a text from my brother that shifted the family dynamic once again. We need to talk. Not about your wrist. Something else. Important. Coffee tomorrow? Curiosity overcame my reluctance. Marcus had never been one for serious conversations, especially via text. I agreed to meet him at a neutral location, a cafe halfway between our homes. I arrived to find Marcus already there, fidgeting with a napkin, his usual confident demeanor notably absent. He looked up as I approached, his expression uncharacteristically somber. Thanks for coming, he said as I sat down. I wasn't sure you would. Your message seemed important, I replied, keeping my tone neutral. What's going on? He glanced around the cafe as if concerned about being overheard, then leaned forward. Dad's in trouble, Liz. Serious trouble. My heart sank. Despite everything, I still cared about my father's well-being. What kind of trouble? Is he sick? Not exactly. Marcus hesitated. It's the store. It's failing. Has been for years, apparently. He's been keeping it afloat with loans, credit cards, second mortgages, but now everything's coming due, and there's no more runway. This explained so much. The escalating financial requests, the desperation beneath my father's bravado, perhaps even the anger when I established financial boundaries. "How bad is it?" I asked. "Bad, like bankruptcy bad. Possibly lose the house bad." Marcus ran a hand through his hair, a gesture so reminiscent of our father that it momentarily softened my heart. "But that's not the worst part. What could be worse than bankruptcy?" He met my eyes directly for the first time since I'd arrived. "He's been using Mom's name and social security number to open credit accounts without her knowledge. She found out last week when a collection agency called about an overdue payment on a card she never applied for." The revelation hit me with physical force. My father, the same man who had accused me of manufacturing an injury to avoid family obligations, had been committing fraud against his own wife. The hypocrisy was staggering. "Does Mom know you're telling me this?" I asked, my mind racing. Marcus shook his head. "No one knows I'm here. Mom's in denial, insisting it was just a misunderstanding. Dad's alternating between making excuses and lashing out at anyone who questions him. It's chaos at home right now. Why are you telling me? What do you expect me to do about it?" The questions came out more harshly than I intended, born of the fear that this was yet another attempt to draw me back into fixing the family's problems. "I'm not asking you to fix it," Marcus said, surprising me. "God knows you've carried enough of the family's burdens. I just thought you should know." And he hesitated, looking suddenly vulnerable. "I wanted to apologize." "Apologize?" I repeated, not quite believing what I was hearing. "For not believing you about your wrist. For all the times I've taken advantage of your generosity, without appreciation. For the family meeting where we all ganged up on you." He swallowed hard. Watching Dad justify using Mom's identity without her consent made me see our family patterns more clearly. The way we've always expected you to be the responsible one, to clean up our messes, to sacrifice your needs for ours. I sat in stunned silence, unable to process this unexpected acknowledgement from the brother who had always been the most dismissive of my concerns. "I'm not asking for forgiveness," Marcus continued when I didn't respond. "I just wanted you to know that at least one person in this family is starting to understand how wrong we've been." Tears pricked at my eyes, not from sadness but from the validation I had craved for so long. "Thank you for telling me," I managed finally, "about Dad, but especially for the apology. It means more than you know." We talked for another hour, more honestly than we had in years. Marcus shared more details about our father's financial deception and his own growing awareness of the unhealthy family dynamics we'd both been trapped in. Me as the responsible caretaker, him as the charming but irresponsible artist. "I've started therapy," he admitted, another surprise. "After that family meeting about your wrist, something felt wrong, like deeply wrong about how we were treating you. It made me look at other patterns in my life. My relationships, my approach to money, my career choices. Turns out, I've been living out a script that was written for me long before I had any say in the matter." As we parted, Marcus hesitated, then asked, "What are you going to do about Mom and Dad's situation?" I considered the question carefully. "Nothing, immediately. I need to process this information and discuss it with my therapist. But regardless, I can't be the one to fix this for them. They need professional financial and legal advice, not their daughter's savings account." Marcus nodded, seeming to accept my response without the guilt trips of the past. "That's fair, just don't cut them off completely. Mom's really struggling with all this, even if she won't admit it. I won't make any decisions in anger. I promised. But I also won't sacrifice my own healing to cushion them from the consequences of their choices." That night, I sat by my apartment window, watching the Portland rain create shifting patterns on the glass as I contemplated the day's revelations. My father's financial deception had created a strange mirror to my own situation. He had been disbelieved and questioned by my mother, just as I had been disbelieved and questioned by my entire family about my injury. The difference, of course, was that my injury was real and documented by medical evidence, while my father had actually committed the deception he was accused of. Still, I couldn't help wondering if this crisis might create an opening for greater understanding in my family. a chance for them to recognize how it felt to have one's reality questioned and dismissed. The next morning, I received another unexpected call, this time from my mother. Her voice sounded thin and tired, lacking its usual self-assured tone. "Eliza? I know you said you needed space, and I'm trying to respect that. But I could really use someone to talk to right now, someone outside the immediate situation." The vulnerability in her voice was so unfamiliar that it took me a moment to respond. "Is this about Dad's financial issues? The credit accounts?" A sharp intake of breath. "Marcus told you." "Yes, yesterday. I'm sorry you're going through this, Mom. It must be devastating to discover that kind of deception." There was a long pause before she spoke again, her voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't believe it at first. I accused the collection agency of making a mistake. Then I accused your father of signing my name just once, in an emergency. I made excuses, rationalized, minimized. The parallels to how they had treated me were striking, but I remained silent, letting her continue. It wasn't until I saw the documents, all these accounts with my forged signature, spanning years, that I had to face the truth." Her voice broke, and even then, part of me wanted to find a way to make it not true, to make it less serious than it was. "That's a natural response to a painful truth," I said gently, drawing on my therapist's insights. "It's hard to accept something that challenges our understanding of a person we love, or a situation we thought we understood." Another silence, longer this time. When my mother spoke again, her words took my breath away. "Like how we responded to your injury. We didn't want to believe it was as serious as you said, because it disrupted our expectations of you as the always available helper." It was the acknowledgement I had been waiting for, though I'd never expected it to come this way. "Yes," I said simply. "That's exactly it." "I'm sorry, Eliza. I'm so sorry we didn't believe you. I'm sorry we valued what you could do for us more than your well-being. I'm sorry we've taken you for granted for so long that we couldn't even recognize when you were genuinely in pain." Tears slid down my cheeks as years of hurt met the balm of recognition and apology. "Thank you for saying that, Mom. It means a lot to hear you acknowledge it." "Can I see you?" she asked hesitantly. "I understand if you're not ready, but I'd like to see those x-rays, if you still have them. I'd like to really understand what you've been going through with your injury." I considered her request, weighing my need for continued boundaries against the potential healing in this moment of genuine connection. "I have a follow-up appointment with my surgeon tomorrow," I said finally. "They'll be taking new x-rays to check my healing progress. You could meet me there if you want, and Dr. Patel could explain what the images show." "I'd like that very much," my mother said, and I could hear the relief in her voice. "Thank you for giving me this chance, Eliza." The next day, my mother met me at the orthopedic clinic, her appearance notably different from her usual polished self. Her hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, her face free of makeup, her clothes casual rather than artistically curated. She looked older, more vulnerable, but also more authentic than I had seen her in years. "Thank you for coming," I said as we sat in the waiting room. She reached over and squeezed my hand briefly. "Thank you for allowing me to be here." Dr. Patel welcomed my mother's presence with professional courtesy, explaining that she would be taking new x-rays to assess my healing progress. As we waited for the images, she asked about my compliance with the treatment plan and any changes in pain levels. "The pain has decreased significantly," I reported, "and I've been extremely careful to avoid any stress on the wrist." "Good." Dr. Patel nodded. "That's exactly what we need for proper healing." When the x-rays appeared on the screen in the examination room, Dr. Patel beckoned us both closer. "These are today's images," she explained, pointing to the screen. "And these are from 6 weeks ago, after we noticed the healing complications." Even to my untrained eye, the difference was clear. The fracture line was less pronounced. The bone alignment improved. "This is excellent progress," Dr. Patel confirmed. "The fracture is healing well now that it's been properly protected. Let me show you the comparison with the earlier images." She pulled up 3 sets of x-rays side by side. The original fracture, the concerning images from 6 weeks ago, and today's improved images. "You can see here," she traced the bone with her finger, "how the initial fracture shows a clear spiral pattern characteristic of a twisting force. This is not what we typically see with repetitive stress injuries, which tend to show more subtle, linear fracture lines. My mother leaned forward, her artist's eye attentive to the details Dr. Patel was highlighting. In these middle images, the doctor continued, you can see how the healing process was interrupted. These subtle changes in bone density and these small shifts in alignment suggest that the wrist experienced intermittent stress during what should have been a protected healing period. My mother's hand found mine and squeezed gently, a silent acknowledgement of understanding. And today's images show what happens when a fracture is properly protected during healing. The bone is remodeling appropriately, the alignment is stable, and there are no signs of the stress patterns we saw previously. So the X-rays actually show the different patterns of force and healing? My mother asked, her voice soft with realization. They tell a story about what happened to Eliza's wrist. Exactly, Dr. Patel nodded. Bone is remarkably responsive tissue. It records and reveals the forces it experiences, both in how it breaks and how it heals. As we left the clinic, my mother was unusually quiet. We walked to a nearby park and sat on a bench, the early afternoon sun breaking through Portland's persistent clouds. I owe you another apology, she said finally. Seeing those X-rays, hearing Dr. Patel explain the patterns, it makes our disbelief even more inexcusable. We didn't just doubt your word, we ignored medical evidence. I nodded, appreciating her recognition but still protective of my healing heart. Why was it so hard to believe me, Mom? Not just about the injury, but about anything that didn't fit your expectations of me as the perpetual helper. She considered the question with uncharacteristic thoughtfulness. I think we needed you to be that person. Your father and I, even Marcus, we built our creative lives on the foundation of your practicality. If we acknowledged your needs, your pain, your right to boundaries, it would force us to face how much we've taken from you over the years. Her honesty was both painful and freeing. For the first time, my mother was seeing our family dynamic clearly, without the comfortable distortions that had allowed her to benefit from my constant giving. What happens now? I asked, echoing Aunt Julia's question from weeks before. My mother turned to face me directly. That depends partly on you. I wouldn't blame you if you wanted to maintain distance from us, especially your father. What he did to me with those credit accounts, what we all did to you for years, it's not something that can be fixed with a simple apology. No, it's not, I agreed. But recognition is a start. Change is what matters now, real, sustainable change in how we relate to each other. My mother nodded, her eyes reflecting a new understanding. I want to try, Eliza, I really do. I can't speak for your father or brother, but I want to build a healthier relationship with you, one based on mutual respect rather than expectation. I'd like that, I said cautiously, but it will take time. Trust, once broken, isn't easily rebuilt. I understand. She hesitated, then added, there's something else I should tell you. Your father and I are separating. At least temporarily. I need space to figure out what I want and whether our relationship can be salvaged after this breach of trust. The news wasn't entirely surprising given what I now knew about my father's financial deceptions, but it still landed with significant weight. My parents had been together for over 35 years. They were a unit, however flawed. Where are you staying? I asked, practical concerns immediately surfacing. A small smile touched my mother's lips. Still the responsible one, aren't you? I'm staying with Aunt Julia for now. She offered her guest room while I sort things out. That's good. Aunt Julia is. She sees things clearly. I hesitated, then added. She was the only one who believed me about my injury without question. My mother winced slightly at the implied criticism, but nodded in acknowledgement. Your aunt has always had a gift for seeing past people's performances to their true selves. It's what makes her such an excellent therapist. This was news to me. Aunt Julia is a therapist? I thought she was a teacher. She was, for many years. But she went back to school in her 40s, got her master's in counseling psychology. She has a small private practice now, works mainly with families and couples. My mother sighed. Perhaps if I had listened to her insights about our family dynamics years ago, we wouldn't be in this situation now. The revelation about Aunt Julia added another dimension to our recent conversation. No wonder she had been so insightful about boundary setting and family systems. She wasn't just speaking from personal experience but professional knowledge as well. "It's never too late to start listening," I offered, the words coming from a place of new wisdom I was still discovering within myself. My mother reached out tentatively, her fingers lightly touching my arm. "Is it too much to ask if we could have coffee once a week? Just to talk, get to know each other as the people we are now, not the roles we've been playing?" I considered her request, weighing my need for continued boundaries against the potential for building something new. "We could try that," I said finally, "but I need you to understand something important." "What's that?" "I'm not going back to being the family problem solver. I can't be your emotional support through the separation or your financial backup as you figure out the mess Dad created. I care about you, but I need to prioritize my own healing right now." My mother nodded solemnly. "That's more than fair. I'm not looking for a caretaker, Eliza. I'm looking for a chance to be the mother I should have been all along. One who gives support rather than just takes it." We parted with a tentative hug, the first physical contact we'd had in months. It felt different from our previous embraces. Less performative, more genuine, carrying both the weight of past hurts and the possibility of future healing. As I drove home, I reflected on the unexpected turn of events. My mother's recognition of our unhealthy family patterns had come through her own painful experience of being disbelieved and taken advantage of, a mirror to what I had endured. While I would never have wished such pain on her, there was a certain symmetry to how understanding had finally emerged through shared experience. The following weeks brought gradual, cautious change. True to her word, my mother met me for coffee once a week, careful to keep our conversations focused on genuine connection rather than her problems. She asked thoughtful questions about my work, my friends, my interests outside of family obligations, topics that had rarely featured in our previous interactions. In turn, I began to see her as a full person rather than just my mother. She shared stories from her art classes, her struggles with creative blocks, her rediscovery of passions she had set aside during her marriage. There were awkward moments and occasional missteps as we navigated this new terrain, but the effort felt worthwhile. My father was a different story. 3 weeks after my conversation with my mother in the park, he called. His voice held none of the reflection or insight my mother had shown, just the familiar blend of authority and charm he had always used to get his way. "Eliza, we need to talk about this family situation. Your mother is being unreasonable, and I thought perhaps you could help her see sense." "Hello to you too, Dad," I replied, keeping my tone neutral despite the immediate attempt to enlist me in fixing his problems. "Yes, hello," he said impatiently. "So about your mother." "I'm not getting involved in your relationship issues with Mom," I interrupted firmly. "That's between the two of you." His voice hardened. "This affects the entire family, Eliza. You can't just pretend it doesn't concern you." "I'm not pretending anything. I'm establishing a boundary. Mom and I are working on building a healthier relationship, and I'd like to do the same with you. But that can't happen if you're trying to use me as a mediator in your marriage." There was a long pause before he responded, his tone shifting to one I recognized from childhood. The disappointed father who couldn't understand why his reasonable expectations weren't being met. "I see. So now you're taking her side." "This isn't about sides, Dad. It's about recognizing that I'm your daughter, not your marriage counselor or financial advisor or mediator." "Fine," he said shortly. "But when you're ready to be part of this family again, let me know." The call ended abruptly, leaving me with a familiar mix of frustration and guilt. I took a deep breath, reminding myself that his reaction wasn't about me but about his own inability to recognize unhealthy patterns. Progress wouldn't happen overnight, and it might not happen at all with some family members. My brother Marcus continued his own journey of recognition and change, though not without setbacks. He would call occasionally to check on my recovery, our conversations gradually extending beyond family drama to genuine sibling connection. He admitted to still struggling financially, but made no requests for loans, instead sharing his plans to find more stable work to supplement his music career. "I've been thinking about what you said, about boundaries not being walls but guidelines for how you deserve to be treated," he told me during one call. "I'm trying to apply that to my friendships, my romantic relationships, even my professional contacts. It's hard, but it feels healthier somehow. It is healthier, I affirmed. Boundaries protect relationships from resentment. When we're clear about what we can and can't give, we're actually being more honest with the people we care about. Damn, Liz. He laughed softly. When did my little sister get so wise? Probably around the time I started valuing my own insights as much as everyone else's. I replied with a smile he couldn't see but could likely hear in my voice. Through these evolving family dynamics, my physical recovery continued steadily. By the 3-month mark after my confrontation with my family, Dr. Patel had downgraded my wrist brace to a simple support for use during strenuous activities only. I gradually returned to my full caseload at the rehabilitation center, though with a new awareness of my own physical limits and the importance of self-care. My experience as a patient had transformed my approach as a therapist. I found myself more attuned to the emotional components of physical recovery, more empathetic to the frustration and fear my patients experienced, more aware of how family dynamics could either support or hinder healing. "You seem different lately," my colleague Sophia remarked one afternoon as we finished our documentation. "More present with the patients somehow. More, I don't know, authentic?" I considered her observation. I think going through my own recovery changed my perspective. When you've been on the other side of the treatment table, you understand what patients are experiencing in a different way. "It's more than that," she persisted. "You're setting better boundaries with demanding patients and families. You're more confident in your clinical decisions. You seem less exhausted at the end of the day." She was right, I realized. The boundary-setting skills I had been cultivating in my personal life had naturally extended to my professional interactions. I no longer felt compelled to take on extra patients when I was already at capacity, to work through lunch breaks to accommodate schedule changes, to be available for consultation outside of work hours. And paradoxically, this had made me a more effective therapist during the hours I did work. 4 months after the family confrontation about my injury, I received an unexpected email from Dr. Patel's office. The subject line read, "Request for professional consultation," which struck me as odd since we had no mutual patients that I was aware of. The email explained that Dr. Patel was putting together a presentation for an upcoming orthopedic conference on the topic of physical manifestations of family dynamics in injury healing. She asked if I would be willing to meet with her to discuss the possibility of using my case as an anonymous example, with all identifying details removed. "Your situation presented a unique and clinically significant illustration of how family beliefs and behaviors can directly impact physical healing outcomes," she wrote. "The X-ray progression in your case provides compelling visual evidence that could help other medical professionals recognize similar patterns in their patients." My immediate reaction was hesitation. Did I want my personal family drama, however anonymized, to become a case study for medical professionals? Would revisiting those painful interactions set back my emotional healing? I discussed the request with Dr. Chen in our next therapy session. "What concerns you most about participating?" she asked after I explained the situation. I considered the question carefully. "I guess I'm worried about feeling exposed, even if my name isn't attached to it. And I'm concerned about how my family would feel if they ever found out." "Those are valid concerns," she acknowledged. "But I wonder if there might also be potential benefits to consider, both for yourself and for others." "Like what?" "Well, there's a certain validation in having your experience recognized as clinically significant. Something that happened to you could help healthcare providers better understand and support other patients facing similar circumstances." She paused thoughtfully. "There can also be healing in transforming a painful experience into something that benefits others." Her perspective shifted something in my thinking. Throughout my life, I had been the responsible one, the helper, the problem solver roles, that had often depleted me because they came from obligation rather than choice. But what if I could choose to help others from a position of strength and wisdom gained through my own healing journey? I agreed to meet with Dr. Patel, with the understanding that I would make no commitments until I fully understood what participation would entail. Our conversation proved illuminating in unexpected ways. What fascinated me from a clinical perspective Dr. Patel explained as we reviewed my case, was the clear correlation between the family's disbelief about your injury and the physical evidence of compromised healing. It's a textbook example of how psychosocial factors directly impact physiological recovery. I never thought of it in those terms, I admitted. To me, it was just a painful family conflict that happened to involve my wrist. But that's exactly the point, she said, leaning forward intently. These connections between family dynamics and physical healing are happening all the time, but they're rarely documented as clearly as in your case. We have the X-rays showing the specific pattern of stress that occurred when you were helping your father despite your own injury. We have the timing of those incidents coinciding with the periods when healing was compromised. It's compelling evidence of something many medical professionals intuitively understand but struggle to demonstrate. As we discussed the potential presentation, Dr. Patel shared stories of other patients whose recoveries had been complicated by family dynamics. The spouse who didn't believe pain was that bad. The parent who pushed a child to return to sports too quickly after an injury. The family that refused to adapt household responsibilities to accommodate recovery needs. Healthcare providers are trained to focus on the physical aspects of healing, she explained. We prescribe the right surgeries, medications, and rehabilitation protocols, but we often miss the critical influence of the patient's home environment and support system. Your case illustrates why that oversight can directly impact medical outcomes. By the end of our meeting, I had agreed to allow my anonymized case to be included in her presentation. We established clear boundaries about what information could be shared, focusing on the medical aspects while keeping personal details to a minimum. I even offered to review her slides before the conference to ensure I was comfortable with the presentation. As I drove home from that meeting, a new sense of purpose began to take shape in my mind. My professional expertise as a physical therapist, combined with my personal experience as a patient, had given me a unique perspective, one that might help others navigate the complex intersection of physical recovery and family dynamics. I began researching graduate programs in psychology, particularly those focusing on health psychology or family systems therapy. Perhaps there was a way to integrate my physical therapy background with a deeper understanding of the psychological aspects of healing. The idea of helping patients advocate for their needs within challenging family systems, of being the supportive professional I had needed during my own recovery, felt increasingly right. 6 months after the family confrontation that had changed everything, I received a text message from my father. It was brief and unexpected. "Can we meet? Just the two of us. There's something I need to say to you." I hesitated, weighing the potential for another manipulation against the possibility, however slim, of genuine change. After consulting with Dr. Chen, I agreed to meet my father at a public cafe, setting a clear time limit of 1 hour for our conversation. He was already there when I arrived, sitting at a corner table with 2 coffees. He looked older than I remembered, the lines around his eyes deeper, his shoulders slightly stooped. When he saw me, he stood awkwardly, uncertainty replacing his usual confident demeanor. "Eliza, thank you for coming." He gestured to the chair across from him. "I ordered your usual oat milk latte with an extra shot. I hope that's still what you drink." The small gesture of remembering my coffee preference surprised me. "It is. Thank you." We sat in uncomfortable silence for a moment before he cleared his throat. "I've been seeing a therapist. Not by choice, initially. It was part of the agreement with your mother. If I wanted any chance at reconciliation, I had to get help for," he hesitated, "for my issues with money and honesty." This was not what I had expected. My father had always dismissed therapy as pointless talk for people who weren't strong enough to solve their own problems. "That's good to hear," I said cautiously. "I didn't think it would help," he continued. "I went to the first session, planning to say whatever was necessary to check the box and move on. But the therapist, she's quite direct, called me out on my defenses in the first 20 minutes. A rueful smile briefly crossed his face. "Reminded me of you, actually," not willing to accept the easy excuse. I remained silent, waiting to see where this was leading. "Anyway, we've been working through some difficult truths about my behavior with money, my gambling, the lies I've told." He took a deep breath. "And about how I've treated you, expected you to be the responsible one while I avoided consequences, dismissed your achievements because they didn't fit my idea of success, disbelieved your injury because it was inconvenient for me." His words were hitting all the right notes, but I had heard my father's persuasive speeches before. I needed more than well-crafted acknowledgments. "I appreciate you saying that, Dad, but what made you want to meet today specifically?" He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small notebook. "My therapist suggested I write letters to people I've harmed, identifying the specific behaviors I need to take responsibility for. I've been working on yours for weeks." He opened the notebook, then closed it again without reading from it. But I realized I needed to say this face to face, not read from a script. He met my eyes directly. "I was wrong, Eliza, about everything. About your injury. About expecting you to support the family financially. About dismissing your career and life choices. I was a selfish father who put my needs and whims above your well-being, and I'm deeply sorry for the pain that caused you." The simple, direct apology, without excuses or qualifications, took my breath away. It was so unlike my father's usual communication style that its very plainness lent it credibility. "There's something else," he continued when I didn't immediately respond. "I finally saw your X-rays. Your mother showed me the copies Dr. Patel gave her. Seeing the physical evidence of your injury, the patterns showing how helping me had harmed your healing." His voice faltered. It made everything real in a way I couldn't ignore anymore. I couldn't tell myself it was just you being dramatic or oversensitive. The evidence was right there, in black and white. "X-ray patterns don't lie," I said quietly. "No, they don't." He fidgeted with his coffee cup. "I wish I had believed you without needing that proof. I wish I had been the kind of father who trusted his daughter's word about her own pain." The conversation continued for the full hour, touching on years of patterns and specific incidents where he had failed to support me or actively undermined me. Unlike previous interactions, he didn't become defensive when I shared how his behaviors had affected me. He listened, acknowledged, and several times simply said, "I was wrong, and I'm sorry." As our time drew to a close, he handed me the notebook. "These are for you, my written apologies and commitments to change. Not because I expect forgiveness, but because I want you to have tangible evidence of my recognition and remorse. You can read them or throw them away. It's your choice." I accepted the notebook, touched by the gesture even as I maintained my emotional boundaries. "Thank you for meeting with me today, Dad. This conversation, it means a lot. But rebuilding trust will take time." "I know," he nodded. "I'm not asking for immediate forgiveness or for things to go back to how they were. I'm just asking for the chance to demonstrate, over time, that I'm capable of change and worthy of eventually being part of your life again, on whatever terms you're comfortable with." As I drove home, the notebook sitting on the passenger seat beside me, I reflected on the journey of the past 6 months. From the moment my family had claimed my injuries were self-inflicted to today's unexpected apology from my father, every step had taught me something essential about myself, about healing, and about the nature of genuine love and support. The X-ray patterns had shown the truth about my physical injury, but they had revealed so much more: the patterns of our family dynamics, the impact of disbelief on healing, the physical manifestation of emotional harm. In exposing these patterns, they had created an opportunity for recognition, growth, and, potentially, reconciliation. I wasn't naive enough to believe that one conversation or one apology could erase years of harmful patterns. Real change would require sustained effort, consistent behavior over time, ongoing therapy for all involved. There would be setbacks and difficult moments ahead, but for the first time, I felt genuinely hopeful. Not just about my family relationships, but about my own future. A future where I could maintain healthy boundaries while remaining open to connection, where I could use my experiences to help others navigate similar challenges, where I could be both strong and vulnerable, independent and connected. As I pulled into my apartment complex, I noticed Aunt Julia sitting on the steps, much as she had been that day months ago when she first checked on me. This time, however, her presence didn't surprise me. We had been meeting regularly, our relationship deepening beyond family connection to genuine friendship. "How did it go with your father?" she asked as I approached. I sat beside her on the steps, contemplating the question. "Better than I expected. Different than any conversation we've ever had." I showed her the notebook. "He's been seeing a therapist, writing apology letters." acknowledging specific behaviors and their impact. She nodded, her expression thoughtful. People can change when they're finally ready to see themselves clearly. It doesn't erase the past, but it can create possibility for the future. That's what I'm beginning to understand, I agreed. The past 6 months have been the most painful of my life in many ways, but also the most transformative. I've learned that sometimes the things that break us open are the same things that allow us to heal more completely. Aunt Julia smiled, squeezing my hand gently. That's the paradox of healing. It often begins with acknowledging how deeply we're wounded. As we sat together in the soft evening light, I felt a profound sense of peace settling over me. My wrist had healed stronger at the fracture site than it had been before, the bone remodeling itself through the very process of breaking and mending. Perhaps relationships could follow a similar pattern, breaking open to reveal the truth, then healing into something stronger, more authentic and more resilient than before. The X-ray patterns had shown what my family refused to see. But in doing so, they had illuminated a path forward, not just for my physical recovery, but for my journey toward the life and relationships I truly deserved. 1 year after that rainy October evening in the emergency room, I stood at a podium in the grand ballroom of the Seattle Convention Center, facing an audience of medical professionals. The screen behind me displayed an X-ray image, my X-ray image, though only I and a handful of others in the room knew that fact. What you're seeing, I explained, gesturing to the distinct spiral pattern of the fracture, is not just a broken bone. It's a physical manifestation of something deeper, the intersection of physical injury and family dynamics. It's evidence of how being disbelieved about our pain can actually impede healing. I took a deep breath, surveying the attentive faces before me. This moment represented the culmination of a year's journey, from injured patient to advocate, from someone whose truth was questioned to someone whose experience was now helping others. The journey to this stage had begun 3 months earlier when Dr. Patel had contacted me after her conference presentation. Her session on physical manifestations of family dynamics in injury healing, which had included my anonymized case, had generated significant interest among healthcare providers. There's a symposium being planned on patient advocacy and holistic healing approaches, she had explained. The organizers are looking for speakers who can address the psychosocial aspects of recovery from both professional and personal perspectives. Your background as a physical therapist who experienced these dynamics firsthand would offer a powerful perspective. My initial reaction had been hesitation. Speaking publicly about my experience meant vulnerability on a scale I hadn't previously contemplated. But as I reflected on how much I had wished for someone to validate my experience during those difficult months, the opportunity to be that voice for others became increasingly compelling. The X-rays don't lie, I continued in my presentation, advancing to the next slide, showing the progression of healing interruptions, but they tell only part of the story. Behind these images is a narrative about what happens when family members claim injuries are self-inflicted, exaggerated, or convenient excuses. Behind these images is a patient whose physical pain was compounded by the emotional pain of not being believed. I shared the medical aspects of my case, the specific patterns that had revealed stress on the healing bone, and the research supporting the connection between psychosocial factors and recovery outcomes. I then transitioned to what healthcare providers could do to better support patients facing similar circumstances. As medical professionals, you're trained to read physical evidence, X-rays, lab results, clinical presentations. But today I'm asking you to also become readers of the invisible evidence, the family dynamics that enter the examination room with your patient, the power imbalances that affect adherence to treatment plans, the emotional environment that can either nurture or hinder healing. The response was overwhelming. During the Q&A session that followed, healthcare providers shared their own observations of similar patterns in their practices. Patients whose recoveries stalled in unsupportive environments, whose pain was dismissed by family members, whose healing accelerated when they received proper validation and support. One orthopedic surgeon approached me afterward, his expression thoughtful. "You've given me a new lens to consider in my practice," he said. "I've always focused on the technical aspects of surgery and rehabilitation. But now I'm thinking about all the patients I've seen whose recoveries didn't follow expected timelines despite proper surgical technique. I wonder how many were facing the kind of disbelief you experienced." "It's often invisible," I acknowledged. Patients rarely volunteer that their family doesn't believe them, partly because they may not fully recognize the pattern themselves. How do you suggest we identify these situations? He asked. Ask better questions, I suggested. Not just, do you have support at home, but, does your family understand the nature of your injury? Have you faced challenges in having your pain or limitations taken seriously? And most importantly, believe your patients when they tell you about their experience. As I drove home from the symposium, I reflected on how much had changed in the year since my injury. My professional path had evolved in ways I couldn't have anticipated. I had enrolled in a part-time graduate program in health psychology while continuing my physical therapy practice, now with a focus on patients navigating complex recovery environments. I had developed a workshop for healthcare providers on recognizing and addressing family dynamics that impact healing, which several hospitals had already expressed interest in implementing. But the most profound changes had occurred in my personal life and family relationships. The growth hadn't been linear or perfect, but it had been real and sustainable. My weekly coffee meetings with my mother had evolved into a genuine friendship. As she worked through her own healing from my father's financial deceptions, she developed new insight into how she had enabled unhealthy family patterns. Our conversations gradually shifted from cautious rebuilding of trust to authentic sharing of our lives, hopes, and challenges. I'm thinking of renting a small studio space, she mentioned during one of our recent meetings, for my art and perhaps to teach small classes. That sounds perfect for you, I encouraged. You've always been a natural teacher. She hesitated, then added, I'd need to borrow for the initial setup costs. I've been looking at small business loans. The old pattern would have been for her to ask me for the money, perhaps with subtle guilt manipulation about supporting family dreams. The fact that she was exploring appropriate financial channels, instead, represented significant growth. There are some great resources for women entrepreneurs, I suggested, maintaining my boundary while still being supportive. I can connect you with my friend Maggie, who works at a community development financial institution. My mother smiled, no hint of disappointment or resentment in her expression. That would be wonderful, thank you. My relationship with my father had taken a different path. After our meeting, where he had given me the notebook of apologies, we established a careful pattern of monthly lunch meetings. His ongoing therapy and participation in Gamblers Anonymous had created noticeable changes in his behavior and communication style. He was more thoughtful, less reactive, more willing to acknowledge mistakes without defensiveness. During our most recent lunch, he had shared news of a significant development. The store is sold, he said, a mix of sadness and relief in his voice. It was the right decision, financially and personally. I couldn't keep pretending I could make it work. How do you feel about it? I asked, knowing how much his identity had been wrapped up in being Richard Mercer, music store owner. Honestly, lighter. Like I've set down a burden I've been carrying for years. He smiled ruefully. The new owners are keeping me on as a consultant for the transition. It's enough involvement to stay connected to the music community without the financial pressures. That sounds like a healthy compromise, I observed. He nodded, then added something that demonstrated just how far he had come. My therapist helped me see that I was holding on to the store partly because I couldn't admit failure. Pride kept me making increasingly desperate choices, including... He paused, including taking advantage of you and betraying your mother's trust. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.